Hello and welcome back to this video series, and we're talking about Centrify support for container Linux. We have been showing you many capabilities, including what's different on the implementation for this OS, our top-of-the-line AD integration, access control and privilege elevation at the system level, secure access and shared account control at the vault level using privilege service, and now we're going to talk about some of the capabilities that we provide around the life cycle of Docker, right? So the key for container Linux is that you want to use utilities like Docker to be able to operate your microservices. So there's three ways we could actually do this, right? So one of the things that we can do is we can use direct authorize to be able to define a privileged role. For example, here this user has the ability to run any command as root, right? So normally he may not be able to do something like, Docker images. I'm just using simple commands because he doesn't have access to the socket. However, the user can actually, in a centralized way, we can actually, without having to deal with sudo, we can have the user elevate to something like, maybe the core account. He's going to be challenged based on what is required, and at this point, he'll be able to do, his Docker stuff, right? That's one way of doing things, right? And in this case, to me, it's very permissive because that means that any person that has that privilege role can do more destructive things in the system. That's one way of doing things. Another way could be to use the role membership, right? So the Docker secondary Unix group can be controlled, and we can actually use an AD group. So notice here I have an AD group. Its name is Centrify AWX Unix Group Docker. And Lisa is a part of that group, right? All I needed to do was to override the Unix identity, and I have Docker with the reserved number that it has. So Lisa right here, she belongs to that Unix group, right? And that means that she's able to, without elevating, she's able to do things like, Docker images, right? Right? Or Docker PS, right? And or Docker PS -a to list all these things, right? So for example, let's just say I wanted to delete a couple of hello world images that I have here. Let's go ahead and do that. So Docker RMI or RM, and I'm just gonna do that and do this another one for this one as well. Right, so what I'm doing here is setting up the next demo, but here still, I'm thinking that this is too permissive. From a attestation perspective, anybody that belongs to this group, you can say, well, these are the people who can do Docker things in my environment. But still, too much permissive. You can have the user be a regular user, and by virtue of becoming part of that Unix group that is controlled through AD, fronted by maybe your workflow, you have two options here. You have completed the proving that you have authorized approvals, for the group membership, and you can attest, who has a membership to that group to effectively demonstrate that these are the people who can have Docker commands. But Centrify provides a deeper way to do this, more granular, right? And it's by using direct authorize, right? So what I've done is I've created a Docker basic role, and I've assigned it to Bart. So there's several commands that I've actually allowed Bart to do with different postures. What I'm doing here is I'm allowing him to run the images command, run it as core, as part of the Docker group. Some of them are authenticated, some of them are not. So for example, for Docker delete images, right, RMI, I'm requiring multi-factor authentication. This allows me to get the maximum level of flexibility because that way I'm aligning with the least privileged command. So let's look at Bart's experience, right? So DZ I have to specify the user, in this case core, otherwise it will default to root. And let's just say, first and foremost, let's do it without privilege elevation. So Docker images is something that he cannot run, right? Or Docker PS, right? All we need to do is do the privilege elevation. So DC do --user core, right, and Docker images. And this user now has the ability to, do Docker things, right? So Docker PS -a, and or let's see, I did not give him Docker PS. I basically gave him the ability to run a container. So here I'm actually enforcing the least access principle. But let's just say we want to delete, let's just say, this hello world image, right? This to me is a destructive command. So one of the things that I've actually done is that I've required multi-factor. So if I do a dz-do, let's say -user core, so we're going to do a docker RMI for this hello world. And that's why I was cleaning up before. Notice that I'm getting the lecture first time Bart is actually doing this. But this is where, because this is a destructive command, I'm actually requiring identity assurance. So I can actually ask for an SMS to be sent to my phone, right? We have different ways to do this. I can type in the code, or I can just simply go through the workflow here and do the push notification. So once I push the button here, all I need to do is press enter, and the command is going to be executed correctly here. So what am I accomplishing here? We are, unlike the first approach in which we have a privileged user that can elevate to the core or root account to do things, that's too permissive. The second one also, if we're controlling the membership of the Docker group, that's a little bit too permissive as well. But now what we have is granularity. We can enforce different types of roles. Maybe you have a senior person that is able to do all the things, but maybe you have a junior person, or maybe you're enforcing separation of duties, right? So the people who actually launch your core, your Docker images, and watch for the lifecycle are different than the ones that do the cleanup. From an attestation perspective, this is where report services excels, right? So I have a report here, and this report is able to show me the right summary. So if I were to look at, in this case, Bart, notice that I have all the commands that he has, right, in the systems that he can run it. So let's go ahead and move to a different system here. If I go into Core AWS, Bart can log in, right? But it also can run Docker RMI, Docker run, and Docker messages. Images. This is great because your security analyst can you show me, what can this user do in this particular system? Here it is with privilege. Also, you have the ability to use tools like Access Manager. If I really wanted to see real quick who can do what, I can just do show effective user rights, and I can hover over Bart and look at the role that he has. It was assigned directly to him. This is a poor practice on my end because typically you want to assign roles to groups so you can control it through group membership. He can only log in through SSH, and he can run commands like this, right? So you tie everything together again with auditing, right? If you really wanted to know what, for example, Bart has been up to, you have the ability to just replay that session, right? And notice that I have the ability to do that in real time as well. So if you think about it from a Docker lifecycle perspective, not only on container Linux, but any platform that can run Docker or any other container-based lifecycle solutions, we have the ability to give you the granularity of access that is required not only to meet, but exceed any regulation or any security practice that you want to implement.